everybody. Welcome back to another Mando Lessons Live. I hope you all can hear and see me and things are all synced up and sounding good on your end. I'm seeing people check in from all around the US so far. There's usually a bunch of international folks as well, but we got Alabama, Texas, Michigan, Minnesota, Ozarks, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma. Thank you all for joining. Josh asks, are there any more Mando Lessons t-shirts? There are not at the moment. I sort of had those t-shirts made and they ran out, and I'm out of shirts for now. But I do have some schemes for some new designs that I hope will be coming out at some point. No specific date at this point, but keep your eyes open. You never know what'll pop up, and I'll let you know when it happens. That tune was, what was that tune? Cold Frosty Morning. Also, just known, it's known as Cold Frosty Morning up here, but I think it's also, maybe it was originally collected as just Frosty Morning. There's another tune or two by that name, but that's the most common one that I run into. Yeah, great. I love that tune. Nice modal tune in the key of A. What would that be? Kind of A Dorian, A modal tuning. Great banjo tune as well if you play clawhammer banjo. That's a super fun one. Denise checking in from Michigan where it's raining. Yep, it is not raining here, but it's not sunny. It's a little cloudy. It might rain. It was raining last night. It's also like close to 60 degrees here yesterday, which was beautiful after being in the 40s for a long time. Nice sunny day for the afternoon. But now we're back to cold and in the 40s. Hello from Ireland. Awesome. Tennessee. Another one from Ireland. Great. Cool. You play that one on the dulcimer. I bet that's a great dulcimer tune. Well, if you haven't been to one of these before, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces and maybe some new ones as well. If you haven't been here before, I sit here for an hour and take questions. I love hearing what people are working on, what they might have questions about, what you've been enjoying musically. I love hearing all that stuff. I'll play some tunes. I'll take requests. I don't do copyrighted stuff, unfortunately, because YouTube's cracking down on my tunes that aren't even copyrighted. They still try to tell me they're copyrighted and they're going to put ads on it, but I try to keep the ads off of the website so you don't have to watch them. Awesome. Manchester, England, Virginia. Thank you all for joining in. Maybe I'll play another tune until the questions start rolling in, but don't be bashful. Throw them out there. Love seeing what people are into. Play something in C. I'll play Tennessee Mountain Fox Chase. Yeah, I can't quite remember how it goes at the moment. There it is. There it is, Tennessee Mountain Fox Chase. I'm pretty sure that tune is on my website. Great tune in the key of C, a little bit crooked, 3 parts, everything that I love. All right, got some great questions here. I'm going to jump into them. Let's see. Hello from California. Great, thank you for joining us. Joe9TT asks, any picking advice for reels and jigs? Which do you think is more difficult? I think I have some advice, but also in terms of difficulty, I think it really depends on what you're used to playing. If you play a lot of jigs and are not as familiar with reels are going to be harder, and vice versa. So I think whatever you get used to. I think a lot of people start with reels, especially if they're not playing specifically Irish music. You run into jigs a lot in Irish music, but if you start out playing old time or bluegrass or things like that, you're less likely to run into jigs, so they're going to be a little less familiar. I think it's more of a question of familiarity than difficulty. In terms of picking, I've got a couple lessons on my website. They're in the technique and fundamentals section. What I've got there is lessons that talk about the right hand picking patterns for reels and jigs. They're different. Reels, you go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, kind of alternating like that. And with jigs, you have a picking pattern that goes down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down. So you have a little pattern of 3 of down, up, down, down, up, down. And if you can get that pattern into your hand, which will be unfamiliar at first, especially if you haven't played jigs, or you've been playing jigs in down, up pattern, that's going to be a little unfamiliar, but it really adds a lot to the feel of jigs if you can get that under your fingers. Again, a couple lessons on that over at my website, MandoLessons.com. Juba Face says, I'm working on Swallowtail Jig. Cool, that's a great tune. Maybe I'll play that in a little bit once I work through a couple more questions here. That's a great tune that's on my website, I'm pretty sure. Cheyenne says, how about getting into some minor tunes? Great idea. I could maybe add that in with Swallowtail Jig. That's an E minor tune, or E modal anyway. Oops. Chat's jumping on me, as always. Karen says, I was on your website the other day and saw your recommendation for the FFCP scales to play in any key. I've been practicing, but I have a long way to go, but thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I talked about that a lot in the last live episode as well. If you look on my website on Learn to Play in Any Key, I talk a little bit about this great resource on a website called Jazzmando, jazzmando.com. They have a great set of PDFs called FFCP, which stands for 4-finger closed position scales, and they have you running all these scales that don't use any open strings. And little patterns like that. And then they work in any key because you're not using any open strings. It's a great pinky workout. Really, really excellent stuff. It's very dense, a couple minutes on that stuff a day, and you don't want to overdo it. You'll just wear your hand out. But it's great stuff to practice. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Karen. Pat asks, any advice for playing duets with banjo players? Oh, I think it depends on the banjo player. I don't know if there's a couple different kinds of banjo. You can have tenor banjo, which you find a lot in Irish music, a clawhammer banjo in old time, and 3-finger in bluegrass. I think a lot of times playing with banjos, especially 5-string banjos, 5-string banjo players, whether it's clawhammer or 3-finger, are going to have a lot of notes that sort of float around the melody. And I think a lot of times, if I'm playing with them and we're both playing melody, I try to stay really straight ahead on the melody so that I don't add a bunch of kind of surrounding notes they can get a little too note busy with if I'm playing a bunch of extra notes and they're playing a bunch of extra notes. So I try to just keep things straight ahead in terms of the melody. And in terms of playing chords, a lot of times I'll play really stripped down chords. A lot of 2-string chords, little octave double stops. Or if I'm playing bluegrass, it's a nice straight ahead chop. Nice and sparse. Because there's a lot going on in 5-string banjos. And you want to leave that space for them. If you're playing with a tenor banjo player, that they're probably just going to be playing straight melody. I really like, again, focusing in on the melody, trying to get a nice unison sound going. Chip asked if Fisher's Hornpipe or Fisherman's Hornpipe is copyrighted. It is not. It's a very old tune. I'll play it. All right. Hello from Johannesburg, South Africa. Great. Thank you for joining us. Cool. So I'll play a couple of these tunes that have popped up. Swallowtail Jig. Is that it? Oh no, I can't remember it. How does it go? That's not it either. I can't remember how Swallowtail Jig goes. I'll look it up later. It'll come into my head later. I'll play a little bit of Fisher's Hornpipe. I believe there's a lesson on my website. Fisher's Hornpipe, a great tune. Pretty sure it's on my website. Joseph asked if the tune Dry and Dusty is on my website. That's a good question. I don't remember. It should be. I'll just check here real quick. Dry and Dusty is not on my website. That is going on the list, though. And while I'm here, I'm going to cheat and look up how Swallowtail Jig goes. Because it's totally eluding me. Oh, yeah. There it is. Alright, I'll play that in a little bit once I catch up with a couple more questions here. Pelican asks, can you run through G, C, and D like in a song and play different licks for the chords each time you run through them? Sure, yeah, I'll do a little bit of that. So if we've got a little, I'll set up a little progression. Actually, I'm now wondering, do you mean a progression that uses G, C, and D, or 3 different progressions in the key of G and C and D? In any case, I guess you could get a little bit out of both. So if I'm going to play licks out of these scales, we've got G, then C, and then D, then back to G, and I might play something like this. We use that. Or so that's a good exercise to do. You know, take little chunks like a measure of G, a measure of C, a measure of D, and try doing the same lick in those 3 keys. So one thing I was doing was using this little pattern that I love to use. You have 2, it's on the A and E strings, you got 2 and 3, 3 and 5, 5 and 7 is the key of G, a little lick. Something like that. The pattern doesn't totally matter. Then you can move over to the middle strings, the D and A strings, do the same thing, and it comes out in C. And then from there you can move up 2 frets and do it again. You have 4 and 5, 5 and 7, 7 and 9, and you're in your key of D, and then back to G. So you get something like that. A great thing to practice. Cheyenne asks, trying to learn Southern Flavor by Bill Monroe. Do I play that? I do not play that tune. I've seen that. I've seen videos of him play it. I know the tune, but I don't know how to play it. Richard asks, new to mandolin, need to learn more about double stops. Any advice? Yes, go to my website, check MandoLessons.com, and look under the technique and fundamentals section of the website. There's a double stop series that I did. It's a four-part series. It's at the bottom of the technique and fundamentals page, and that'll put you on the right track. Oops, chat jumped on me. Oh boy, this is great. There's tons of stuff that I'm going too slow to find. Recovering Bassist says, can you explain double stops a bit to me? So the basic idea is double stops are more than one set of strings being played at the time. So something like this that I was just doing is a little double stop line because it's 2 sets of strings. And again, check out that series if you want to learn how to do them. Just Van de Wow, apologies if I'm probably pronouncing your name incorrectly, says, I'm wondering on how to make my tune over a song written by friends. So I wonder, maybe you, I don't know exactly what you mean, but if you mean you've made up a melody, like, and then your friends made up a song and you want to put that melody into the song, there's a couple ways. One thing is to just get it into the same key that your friends sing their song in. Another thing is make sure the sort of the feel of the tune, whether it's a reel or a jig, fits. Sometimes you can take tunes that I've written, or tunes that are traditional, that are maybe reels, and turned them into jigs is a good exercise. So you could take a tune like the Virginia, a reel, and you can turn it into a jig. Kind of put that dugga-da feel behind it. Let's see. Will I play June Apple? I was actually thinking about playing that tune as the first tune I played, but I played Cold Frosty Morning instead. Definitely, I'll add that one to the list. Do I know Autumn Woods? A question from Andrew. I do not know that tune. I made you... Uh-oh. Brenda says, you made me want to play tenor banjo and you played it last week. It's a slippery slope. It's a super fun instrument. What about playing with a group of dulcimers? That is not an experience that I've had. I've maybe played with one other... with a dulcimer player, but with a group, I don't really know. I'd say, trust your ears. I think in general, what I try to do, regardless of the instrument that I'm playing with, is I try not, every instrument has its own strengths and weaknesses, and I try not to kind of play to those same strengths. So if, with a banjo, it's got lots of other kind of rolling notes going on along with the melody. So I really don't try to emulate that. I try to leave that space for the banjo. So identifying what's going on with a dulcimer, maybe it's the droning strings, things like that. So you could, leave out drones and maybe play some harmonies, or sort of find out if the tune maybe needs a nice little like chop or groove behind it, more of accompaniment style. Okay, yeah. So I'll play a little swallowtail jig because Robert also just reminded me that I said I'd play that. And then what was the other one I was going to play? Oh yeah, June Apple. We'll do a couple of those and then catch up with the chat some more. There's a little bit of swallowtail jig. Do a little more chatting here. Sheldon says, I learned Jesse James on the 5-string banjo. Any advice on a mandolin arrangement so it doesn't sound like the banjo version? I don't know that song or tune off the top of my head. I may have heard it, but it's not clicking now in the heat of the chat. But you know, I think, yeah, so I think, you know, taking something like some chop chords, if it's a song, and, you know, doing something that isn't very banjo-y, you know, play the mandolin to its strength, see if you can add in some of those double stops. Things like that, sort of figure out, what I really like to do when I learn a new instrument is figure out sort of what the strengths of that instrument are, how people tend to use the instrument and what I like to hear out of the instrument, and then learn to do that. And I know it's also very valuable to, you know, take prior instrument knowledge that you have to say, like, oh, I know how this tune goes on the banjo and how I play it, and using that information to sort of figure out how to play a new instrument is totally valuable. And I'm not saying don't do that. By all means, you know, cross-pollinate that information. But at the same time, you know, figure out what the strength of the instrument is and run with that. Andrew says, any tips on maintaining your strum rhythm while throwing in triplets? Triplets and dotted notes always throw off my rhythm. Yes, so a couple things. Triplets, definitely, so there's two ways that triplets are going to happen. Or I guess there's two. You're going to either play triplets in a reel or a jig, or something that's in 4 or 3. And if it's in a jig, they line up really nicely because you get, because a triplet takes up 2 eighth notes and turns it into 3 notes. It turns it into a triplet, but it takes up the space of 2 eighth notes. So when you're playing jigs, it lines the pickup nicely. So you get down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down. So you can either do triplets down, or up, down, up. So that's down, up, down. And you get down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down, 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 up, down. Or if you do up, it's down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. But when you get to reels, what you do is you end up swapping the beat. So you need to either start your pick, the direction of your triplet. So sometimes you'll see triplets in sort of as little pickups. And so what you can do there is you can either go down, up, down, down, and that downstroke, you have to kind of double down at the end. Or you can do up, down, which is a little more awkward maybe to start on that upstroke, but then you're good to go. So what you need to do is find out sort of how to get in and out of that triplet in a way that makes sense to your pick direction. Something that will help you realize when things are going awry is if you have a really solid sense of what your pick direction should be, and you'll just sort of get this physical feeling of like, oh, my pick isn't doing what it should, and at that point you can stop and say, okay, I gotta go back and slow this down a little bit and see how I can make this work and maintain good pick direction. Do I know the Rocking the Boat jig? I don't know that tune. Whoops, the chat jumped on me. Can you take bits and pieces out of licks in one song and incorporate them into another song? A question by the Pelican 3. Yes, you absolutely can. People do it all the time. And it's a, you'll probably hear things like something like that, or just kind of little tags and endings and middle bits. And that's totally an acceptable thing to do. Another thing, also what I do is sometimes I find a nice little moment in a song. It can even just be like a recording of a song. It's kind of the artistic process of, figuring out, like, you hear, whatever you hear and you learn to play sort of makes it into your repertoire, and you might find yourself, taking a little tag or a little lick or moment from one tune and inserting it into another, and that's totally fine. Happens all the time. At the same time, I think being conscious of how to, listen to a melody or a song or a tune and figure out, what really suits. It may be that a lick from another tune is really going to suit this tune as well, or this song as well. But, if you can listen to the words and the emotion of what's happening in the song and in the story, and also, or, how the melody itself sounds, then you can maybe come up with something that really fits into the tune. So if there, in the song something really bad happens and there's a big minor chord, you can play with that moment and try to make it a little spooky or extra sad or something like that. So kind of crafting what you're playing to the specific song is great, and at the same time recycling licks is just as good. Chip says, here's some has some requests. Make a Little Boat, I don't know. Smith's Reel, I don't know. Squirrel Hunters, I do, so I'll play Squirrel Hunters. Great tune, one of my favorite tunes. Squirrel Hunters, I learned it from the playing of John Hartford. If you want to hear me play more of that, I actually recorded that on the first album with my band Velocipede. You can find, you can stream that online or buy it through Bandcamp or whatever. You can find it on my website in the store, on MandoLessons.com, in the store or shop page. I never remember what it's called. I'm going to go with store. Yeah, store. I believe it's on my first album with Velocipede. Oh, okay, there it is. I'm just going to double check on that and make sure I'm not... Huh, maybe I didn't. Did I put it on the second album? Well, maybe I didn't record it. It's all in my head. Well, good tune anyway, but I did not record it. But you can check out those albums if you want anyway. Do I know Rock, Salt, and Nails? I know the song. I don't know how to sing it, but I know of it. Great version of that done by, I believe, the Bluegrass Album Band, one of my favorite my favorite bluegrass bands. Check them out. They're called the Bluegrass Album Band. It's Tony Rice and Doyle Lawson. A bunch of great pickers. Good stuff. Do I know Soppin' Up the Gravy? I don't know it. I don't know how to play it, but I know that, what's his name? Does a great fiddle version that I'm blanking on his name. Stuart Duncan. There's a great video somewhere on YouTube of Stuart Duncan ripping through that tune. Check that out. He'll do that much more service than I will. Peter asked, you refer to drone strings a lot. What are they? So for a in-depth description, check out the Double Stop series at the bottom of the page of Technique and Fundamentals on my website, MandoLessons.com. But as a quick kind of intro, a lot of drone strings. So I'll use Squirrel Hunters. You know, the melody is going... And so for it's a lot of it's based on, it's in the key of A, and a lot of it's based on the A string. And what I do is, in the key of A good drone string is an E string. So I drone that, so what I do is I kind of play through the A and E strings the whole time. So you have that upper E string kind of ringing out above the melody versus kind of fills out the sound a little bit. You can do the same thing with lower drone strings. You get that sort of sound. You know, you get that low G ringing out. Kind of get, it's often a straight, if you think of the key of a tune or a song, and it's the key of G, a nice drone string is going to be your open G. Ditto for other keys and other drone strings. A lot of times your drone string is just going to be an open string that you can play along with the melody. All right, thank you very much, Pat Howe, for the super chat. I appreciate the donation. Oop, my chat just jumped, but I'm trying to catch up with things here. Yes, Shahan says, I was seriously impressed when you scratched your nose without getting off rhythm at all or anything. Well, the only thing I can say to that is practice makes perfect. I have a terminally itchy nose, and so I've gotten good at going up and scratching it when need be without losing time. I think I got it from play a lot of contra dances where we just play, you know, it might be 10, 12, 15 minutes straight without pausing, and I'm playing rhythm. So I got really good at, you know, scratching or doing whatever I need to keep the rhythm going as the sole guitar player in the band. You can't just have the guitar player drop out and scratch their head or whatever, so a lot of practice there. Robert says, my playing tends to be much quieter than I'd like it, but if I strum harder, I lose control. Is that just a matter of practice with stronger picks? Oh, sorry, with stronger picking. Yeah, I think a lot of it is practice. Yeah, I would say practice and practice slow, especially, you know, when working on playing louder. There's a certain level of, you know, when when you try to change one aspect of your playing, something else is often going to suffer. And a lot of times, if you're practicing playing louder or playing faster, then the rhythm is really going to suffer, and your control is going to suffer. But really, I think slowing down, seeing if you can. I'm gonna try to avoid blasting out this microphone, but if you can turn away from the mic a little bit, I think it can be helpful. Really, the mandolin. A lot of people are a little hesitant to really wail on these things, but they're really strong. You can make them be louder than you want them to be. Quick pause to say thank you, Andrew, for the super chat donation. Appreciate it, and glad you could join us for the first half hour. And as always, for anyone that can't make the whole thing or needs to leave or can't make it some week, these are always archived, so you can watch them later at any time. You just can't join in the live chat. But back to the question. Don't be afraid to really be physical with these things. You can wail on them, sort of push them to the limit. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want to be careless with the instrument and scratch it all up. Although some people do. I've got a fair amount of scratches on this thing. Not a ton, but I've definitely done some hit the top with my pick on more than one occasion. But I think part of it's just getting comfortable with, even if you just like mute the strings. And I think something that can be helpful is if you play along with a recording and you just mute the strings and really just like lean into it, give it a little kind of physical push. And you often what that will turn into is really having a feeling in your arm of you really start to kind of feel it through your forearm and your wrist and kind of get a sense of like energy going through your arm. That can be a good thing to have experience feeling. And then when it comes time to having to put that into practice in a session or on a stage, it's nice to be able to work with those volume dynamics. Request for Arkansas Traveler, can do, great song. Red Tom of the Hill, I don't know that one. Rawhide, that one I think might be a copyright tune. And I don't do a whole lot of raw. I usually just kind of follow other people when it comes to Rawhide and a lot of that bluegrass stuff, unfortunately. Covering Basis says, do you play octave mandolin? I do. I actually have an octave mandolin out just off screen, so I'll play Arkansas Traveler on this curious machine. I got this thing on Craigslist. It's a resonator tenor guitar, so it's just 4 strings, but it's tuned. Ooh, I never actually tuned it, but yeah, good enough. Tuned GDAE like a mandolin or an octave mandolin or a tenor banjo. A lot of times what I do is I play in a different tuning, GDAD, with tenor guitar and bouzouki and octave mandolin, and I do mostly accompaniment and a lot of kind of drone. I kind of imitate drop D guitar tuning or dadgad guitar. But I'll play a little bit of Arkansas Traveler on this thing. little maybe jazzed up version of Arkansas Traveler. Ricky Skaggs plays Rawhide so slow. Oh, just kidding. Yeah, Ricky knows how to blaze through that one. Elzic's Farewell. That's a tune that I know, but I can't remember how it goes. I usually require some fiddle player to remind me of how that one goes. It's a great tune though. Look it up if you aren't familiar with it. Maybe I'll have that one another time. Hello from Oregon, from Richard. Thanks for joining in. Christopher says, regarding practice, do you follow one routine with warm-ups, then scales, then songs, or whatever you do? Or do you keep a lot of variety in how you practice? And how much per day? Variety on all counts. I think even variety within the amount of variety. This is getting kind of meta, but I've gone through a number of different practice styles over the years. I've definitely done more kind of scheduled out practice times with, I was talking earlier about the FFCP, 4-finger closed position scales, working through some kind of finger buster exercises, things like that, and then working on whatever I needed to get through, whether it's songs or learn, like kind of really working on new tunes consistently, or if I have particular music that I need to learn for a performance or a recording or something like that. Doing that, and so I did that for many years, but also at this point I kind of, unless I have obligations that I need to really work on learning a tune or a song or a chord progression to this or that for a performance or recording, I mostly just kind of let my interests guide me in what I want to practice. I could definitely benefit from doing more FFCP and closed position stuff and playing in some different keys. But at this point, I really, I'm kind of playing music in more of like a folk context. So I'm really mostly focusing on learning some new tunes here and there. I've trended a little bit towards just learning new instruments and then bringing what I've learned on new instruments back to the mandolin. How much per day? For myself, I've kind of, again, varied widely. Sometimes I don't play at all. Rarely, but occasionally I go a day or two without playing. I usually play some instrument. I don't always play mandolin every day. But I usually play some kind of instrument every day, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. But in the past, when I've been really obsessed or I was in school playing and I majored in music, I had tons of time to play and would clock 4 or 5 hours. I think what the secret for me that really helped me was focusing on and sometimes it was just subconscious and I wasn't really thinking about this as a practice technique at the time, but if you can just figure out whatever it is that's the most fun to do, that's going to help you clock your hours and not make it feel like work. If you can just be having time flies when you're having fun. So if you're having fun playing mandolin, doing a particular thing, keep doing that because you're gonna clock those important hours a lot quicker. At the same time, it's good to push yourself. So but I also think if you spend all that time, hours and hours doing something that's fun, you're gonna get bored of it naturally eventually, and you're gonna. I find myself, I go through cycles of like wanting to push myself and also wanting to just sort of play what I'm comfortable with. But a little bit every day is great. I think practicing kind of smarter rather than, if you practice distractedly, you're going to kind of get distracted results. And if you practice with a lot of focus, you're going to get nice, focused, efficient results. Yellow Rose Farm, hello from Maine. Hello. Thanks for... Oops, everything's jumping on me. Where'd I go? Oh no. I really went for it. My chat just totally took off and I can't find my place anymore at all. Okay, there we go. do I start practice sessions with something specific in mind? Not always. I think it's great. It depends on what kind of person you are. I'm often a very kind of list oriented person. So if it feels good for me, and I go through cycles where sometimes it does feel good to sit down and have like a chart in front of me of like, okay, I'm gonna do this for 10 minutes, this and this and this. I got to work on that. That's great. But sort of inevitably, truthfully, after a while, I'm just like, oh, I don't want to do this stuff anymore. I just want to do what I'm doing. I think, again, I go back to kind of maximizing fun time with the instrument to make it feel less like work, because music shouldn't be work, at least if you're not a professional musician. And even if you are, the more fun you can have with it, the better everything is, in my experience. Boyd asks, what kind of pick do you prefer for the mandolin size-wise? It depends on the mandolin, but put my pick down somewhere there. Nope, these are both the same. There it is. So the labels are all worn off of these, and again, anytime I talk about gear, I don't have any, I'm not getting paid to talk about this. I don't get free stuff. The pick that I use here is it's a Dunlop Prime Tone 1.5 millimeter, so it's a big triangle, pretty thick. I've seen thicker, but I like kind of the 1.5 millimeter size. And I use that on my Ellis. I've got an old Gibson oval hole. You can just see there. And with that, I just use Fender heavy teardrop shaped picks. I don't know, these are maybe like around 1 millimeter. On some guitars, I use really thin picks. On other guitars, I think a great use of a couple dollars is go to a music store and buy a bunch of different size and shapes picks. See what sounds best on your instrument and is most comfortable to you. I can't say this. Mridrid, Mr. Meridrid. Apologies on your screen name there. It says, can you tell me about your mandolin and what makes a good one? So this is a mandolin made by Tom Ellis in Austin, Texas. I've had it for about a decade now. I love this mandolin. It wasn't cheap, but I've put thousands and thousands of hours into it, and as a professional musician, it feels good to have an instrument I can rely on. That said, there's a lot of great instruments out there. The one I recommend on my website is a Kentucky KM150. Again, no sponsorships or deals or payment or free stuff in any way, shape, or form. It's a $300 mandolin. You can often get it in a kit for around $400 with a case and some other stuff, strap, strings, picks, instruction books. Especially if it's set up, if it comes from like a well-respected shop that's going to set it up right. That I think that sort of is my go-to suggestion for people that want to buy a mandolin. In terms of what makes a good one, I don't really know. If I play it and it sounds good and it feels good, it is good to me. And if it doesn't fall apart, and if it's nice and predictable and steady, doesn't need a lot of continual maintenance, that's what makes it good to my ear. All right, Kevin says, been working on East Tennessee Blues. Lessons on my website for anyone that wants to learn it, rather. Can I play it? Yeah, probably. Let's find out. Yeah, this is it, I think. East Tennessee Blues. It's been a little while. Old Joe Clark, great tune. I'll add that one to the list that I'll play in a second here once I get through some more chat. John Hardy, Kia A, another great one. I can do a little bit of that. Tom Dooley, do I play that? That's a copyright song, so I'm going to avoid that one, but it's a great song. I'm glad you're getting it down on the uke. Do you need humidifiers for the mandolin? What I have in the winter, it gets really cold and dry here in Maine. So I have well, it's not there anymore, but it's finally humid enough that I put it away for the winter. But I have like a room humidifier that I've used. I'm not the best at humidifying instruments. I should be better, but I've gotten lucky so far. But it's something I should get more in the habit of doing because it's good for the instruments. Do you play the A style because the tone suits your style, or just not a fan of F styles? Mostly I play A styles because they're cheaper. A style is traditionally about half the cost of an F style of a similar make or model. So like a similar F style from Tom, the guy who built my mandolin, it's about twice as much as this. And to me, the sound, there's not a huge difference in sound between an A and an F style. There's often more difference between individual instruments than there is of, the F model equivalent of this. There's going to be a little difference, but in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of sound difference between comparing the same model of A and F mandolins by the same maker and same, spec. I've always played A styles mostly for I've played F styles that I've loved, but I've either out of my price range or, I feel like I can spend the money for an A style, if I've got $1,000 budget, I can spend $1,000 and get an F style mandolin, or I can spend $1,000 and get potentially what would cost $2,000 as an F style mandolin as an A style. Hope that makes sense. It's a little rambly. I just had a funny the chat jumped just as I read the words dirty licks, but I found it again. Yeah, Cheyenne says you should play slide like Chicago Blues on your resonator and get down some dirty licks. I would love to learn to play slide. I don't play any slide stuff. Sam Bush does some great slide. He's got a National resonator mandolin that he's got a super high action on and tunes to an open tuning and plays with a slide that's totally awesome. I love that stuff. I just don't know how to do it. Can I put more bluegrass songs on my website? Yes, that's definitely a goal. The problem is copyright. It's kind of the same old story, but so much bluegrass is copyrighted because it's a lot of original songs that were written from the 40s onward, so they're all copyrighted, and I don't have the rights to do them. Carl says, hello from Las Vegas. What do you suggest for learning familiar tunes in different keys like D and A? I would say look at my website. Check out. You can sort all the fiddle tunes on my site by key. So if you're looking to learn tunes in D and A, go there. Or you can sort it by genre. If you're playing within a particular genre, sort the tunes on my website that way. And 95% of the tunes that I teach are very kind of common session tunes. So that would be my advice. Covering bases, what did that reso cost you? I can't remember. I got it on. I got it in a guy that played a bunch of ukuleles. Got a bunch of tenor guitars, which I play a lot of tenor guitars. Because he was like, oh, they're like big. And he tuned them like big ukuleles, or I guess like the top 4 strings of a guitar, but never really took to them. So I bought like 3 or 4 instruments off of him. So it's hard to say. I think you can find them online used for like $500 or $600 maybe, somewhere around there. It's what is the brand? Republic resonator tenor guitar. It's kind of a uncommon creature, but I like it. It's super fun. But I can't really remember what I paid for it because it was in a big batch. How low should the action on the mandolin be? I think it's personal preference. You know, you don't want to be... I don't know number-wise off the top of my head. I think, you know, if you can comfortably play wherever you find yourself playing, and it's not so high that it's hurting your fingers, but also not so low that you're getting a lot of buzz and kind of bad sounds out of it. Whatever's comfy. Yeah, that's sort of... I tend to play with a bit of a higher action because I feel like I can really push the instrument with my right hand and play harder and not get as much buzzing and bad sounds out of it. Chat's jumping all over the place today. Sean says, I got this advice once on over practicing without focus, potentially betting in bad habits. People say practice makes perfect. It doesn't. It doesn't. Practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. Yeah, I agree. I've heard that same advice. Yeah, you know, if you practice, you know, if you practice playing the mandolin like behind your head, you're gonna get really good at playing it behind your head, but it's not gonna make you any better at playing it like you would normally play it. Or if you know, if you only practice playing in the key of E flat, you're not necessarily gonna get better at playing in the key of D. So whatever you practice, you're gonna get better at. And if you practice holding the pick between your middle and ring finger, you'll get better at doing that. But nobody ever plays like that, so it's not going to be of much use. So if you practice bad habits, you're going to get better at those bad habits. So like I said, you know, practicing with focus and intention and playing slow, all that stuff. Make sure you're practicing Make sure you're practicing the skills that you want to improve and with proper techniques so that you can get the results that you want. And yeah, Sean's little statement of practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent, and perfect practice makes perfect. Can I play Rocky Top? Another copyrighted song, unfortunately. I've got a couple tunes that I should be playing though. I had what do they have? I had June Apple. I can't remember. Uh-oh. I've forgotten. Done too much talking. Old Joe Clark and June Apple. I'll do those. June Apple. One recently came out on my website. If you want to learn it, it's over there. Okay, I'll do a couple more questions here, but then I gotta run. It's a little after 1. And then I'll play a little Old Joe Clark to take us all out here. Cheyenne asks, how do other channels post tutorials on copyrighted tunes? Dangerously and often with advertising. So, copyrighted... the world of copyright on YouTube is and sort of the internet in general, is such a new thing that nobody really knows how to do it. So, you know, people have had their channels totally shut down. People, at this point, sometimes people will let you do copyrighted material, but they put ads on your channel and they get all the revenue. Or there's some amount of revenue share that's possible. But also, with that, there's also the caveat that, you know, the copyright holder can change their mind at any time, which can put your channel into jeopardy. So it's a risky business doing copyrighted stuff. I don't know all the ins and outs of how people do it, but a lot of it's either ad revenue or just hoping they don't get caught. And I've got 10 years now of MandoLessons up here, and I don't want to get it all shut down in the blink of an eye, so I steer clear of that stuff. Wandering Boy, don't know it. Little Birdie, I don't have. I'm gonna stick to Old Joe Clark on this one in terms of requests, but maybe next time. I know a little bit of that. I gotta check if it's copyright, but Nina Nana, I don't know that one, but I do love lullabies, so I'll check that one out. And Michael asks, do you primarily practice and play on just one mandolin? Yep, this mandolin here, my Ellis, is the one I spend 99% of my time on. I've got an old Gibson that I've just kind of gotten a couple of those. Well, I've played old Gibsons for about a year now, but really, this is the mandolin that I gig with and the mandolin that I do most of my practicing on. But it's a nice tonal change to play the Gibson every once in a while. And I've played the Gibson on some of these Q&As in the past if you want to look back and find one of those. But okay, thank you all so much for tuning in this week. I'll take us all out with a little Old Joe Clark. And next week, same time, same. I'm pretty sure I'm here next week. Let me just check real quick. Yeah, I think I'll be here at noon next week, and pretty much every week. It'll get a little dicey in the summer, and in May I'm going to be gone for a while. But at the moment, plan to see me here. You can always come to this link, whatever it is, youtube.com, MandoLessons/live. And often I'll post when the next one's going to be as the little background screenshot of the video while I'm not on. So, little Old Joe Clark. Oh, that was June Apple again. Ah, there it is. I went back to June Apple. But, oh well, what you gonna do? Cool, thank you all so much for joining in. Hope to see you next week. Have a great weekend.